The night I realized how invisible a person could become was the same night someone finally saw me. Rain drifted across Manhattan in silver lines, turning every streetlight into a blurred halo of gold. Cars rolled through the wet avenues. Umbrellas moved like dark waves along the sidewalks. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere except me. I sat alone across from the Moretti Grand Hotel, pulling my thin coat tighter against the cold. The building rose above the city like a palace of light. Crystal chandeliers glowed behind enormous windows. Luxury cars arrived one after another beneath the covered entrance. Guests stepped inside smiling, protected from the weather and the noise and the uncertainty waiting outside. I watched them for a moment longer than I should have. Not because I envied their money. I envied their peace. My phone vibrated again. Another reminder. Another bill. Another warning that I did not have enough time, enough energy, or enough resources to solve every problem waiting for me. I silenced it without reading the message. I already knew what it said. The numbers never changed. The pressure never stopped. For months I had been working every extra shift I could find. During the day I smiled at hotel guests. At night I worried about rent, medical expenses, and whether I could keep my family afloat for one more month. My mother needed care. My younger sister needed support. Every responsibility seemed to find its way to me. I told myself I could handle it. I always did. At least that was the story I repeated whenever things became difficult. A cold wind swept through the avenue and sent a shiver through my body. My shoes were soaked from walking through the rain. My hands felt numb. I had skipped dinner again to save money. Lately, that had become a habit. Across the street, laughter drifted from the hotel entrance. Valets greeted arriving guests. Soft music floated from the lobby whenever the doors opened. Everything inside looked warm, safe, untouchable. I lowered my eyes and stared at the pavement. Maybe I was simply tired. Maybe I was carrying too much for too long. Maybe I was finally reaching the point where pretending everything was fine no longer worked. A wave of dizziness rolled through me. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. Then another. Usually that helped. Tonight it did not. The city lights blurred together. Sounds became distant. The rain felt heavier somehow. I pushed myself to my feet, hoping movement would help. Instead, the world tilted slightly. I reached toward a nearby stone planter for balance. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. Not fear. Exhaustion. Pure exhaustion. I looked up one last time toward the highest floors of the Moretti Grand Hotel. Far above the city, behind a wall of glass and golden light, a tall figure stood alone in a penthouse office overlooking the streets below. Even from that distance, something about him commanded attention. Still, silent, watching. For the briefest moment, it felt as though his eyes met mine through the rain. Then everything around me faded into darkness, and the last thing I saw was the glow of the hotel shining against the storm. When I opened my eyes, I expected to see rain. Instead, I saw soft golden light stretching across an unfamiliar ceiling. For several seconds, I simply stared upward, unable to understand where I was or how I had gotten there. The cold sidewalk was gone. The sound of traffic had disappeared. Even the storm seemed far away now. Everything around me felt quiet, warm, safe. The realization alone felt unreal. I pushed myself upright slowly and found myself sitting on a luxurious sofa inside an enormous suite overlooking Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city glittering beneath the night sky. Thousands of lights stretched toward the horizon. The storm clouds were beginning to clear. For a moment, I thought I might still be dreaming. Then a voice broke the silence. "You should sit for another minute." I turned toward the sound immediately. Standing near the windows was the man I had seen before everything faded away. Even from across the room, there was something impossible to ignore about him. Tall, calm, controlled. He wore a dark tailored suit that looked as though it belonged in the same world as the luxury surrounding us. One hand rested casually in his pocket while the city lights reflected behind him. "Where am I?" My voice sounded weaker than I wanted. "Inside the Moretti Grand." His answer was simple, direct. I looked around again. The room was larger than my entire apartment. Fresh flowers rested on a polished table. A fire glowed quietly along one wall. Everything felt expensive without trying to appear expensive. My eyes landed on my purse sitting neatly beside a chair. Relief immediately washed through me. "How did I get here?" The man stepped forward. "You lost consciousness outside." Embarrassment flooded my face. I remember part of that. A faint hint of amusement touched his expression before disappearing. My staff brought you upstairs. I lowered my eyes. I hated being the person who needed help. Hated becoming someone else's responsibility. Thank you. The words came quietly. He nodded once. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Surprisingly, the silence did not feel uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. Eventually, he walked toward the seating area and sat across from me. Vincent Moretti. The name immediately caught my attention. Everyone in New York knew it. Businessman, hotel owner, influential figure, a man powerful enough that people changed their tone when speaking about him. My heartbeat quickened slightly. Vincent seemed to notice everything. Olivia Bennett. I introduced myself automatically. I know. The answer surprised me. He glanced briefly toward my purse. Identification was necessary to make sure you were properly cared for. I nodded slowly. That made sense. Yet none of this felt normal. People like Vincent Moretti did not stop their lives for strangers sitting in the rain. They certainly did not bring them into private penthouse suites. As if sensing my thoughts, he leaned forward slightly. His expression remained calm, but his eyes held an intensity that made it difficult to look away. Olivia, he said quietly, when was the last time someone asked if you were all right? The question struck harder than I expected, because the truth was, I could not remember. For several seconds, I could not answer him. I looked away toward the city lights beyond the windows and searched for a memory that should have come easily. Someone asking if I was all right. Someone stopping long enough to notice. The silence itself became my answer. Vincent seemed to understand. He leaned back slightly and studied me with the same calm attention that somehow felt more unsettling than judgment. Judgment I knew how to handle. Kindness was harder. That long? He asked quietly. I laughed once, though there was no humor in it. People usually ask if the work is finished, if the bills are paid, if I am available to help. My fingers tightened around the edge of the sofa. Not many people ask how I am doing. Vincent nodded slowly. The room fell silent again. Outside, Manhattan glittered beneath the clearing sky. The storm was fading. The city looked peaceful from up here, almost as if none of the problems below existed. I wish life worked that way. Tell me about your family. The question surprised me. Most people changed the subject when life became serious. Vincent seemed to move directly toward it. I hesitated for a moment before answering. My mother has health issues. My voice softened. Nothing dangerous right now, but she needs regular care. I stared at the skyline. My younger sister is in college. She is brilliant. She works hard. I want her to finish without worrying about everything I worry about. Vincent listened without interrupting. Not once. The simple act of being heard felt strangely unfamiliar. So you carry all of it. I smiled faintly. Most of it. He glanced toward the windows. That is a heavy load for one person. The words landed harder than they should have, because I had spent so much time convincing myself I was supposed to handle everything alone that I forgot how heavy it had become. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Vincent stood and walked toward a small table near the fireplace. He returned carrying a glass of water and placed it in front of me. The gesture was simple, ordinary, yet something about it tightened my throat unexpectedly. He was one of the most powerful men in New York. Still, he noticed things. Small things. Human things. I accepted the glass and took a sip. Thank you. He nodded once. What do you want, Olivia? I frowned. What do you mean? Not what your family needs. Not what your responsibilities require. His gaze met mine. What do you want? The question stopped me completely. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I did not know. Or maybe I knew and had simply stopped allowing myself to think about it. My eyes drifted toward the city again. I always wanted to manage a luxury hotel. The confession escaped before I could stop it. Not because of the money. I just loved the idea of creating a place where people felt welcome. A faint smile appeared on Vincent's face. A place where people felt seen. I looked at him in surprise. He understood immediately. Somehow he always seemed to. The room grew quiet once more. Then Vincent folded his hands and spoke a sentence that made my heartbeat quicken. Olivia, I think you gave up on that dream too soon. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. I stared across the room at Vincent while the city lights reflected against the windows behind him. The dream. The one I had carefully buried beneath responsibilities and overdue bills. The one I stopped talking about because talking about it hurt more than forgetting it. I did not give up on it. The words left my mouth automatically. Even I did not believe them. Vincent remained calm. No. I lowered my eyes. Life happened. He nodded slowly. That is usually how people describe it. There was no criticism in his voice. Somehow that made the truth harder to avoid. I wrapped my hands around the glass of water and stared at the surface. Dreams are easy when nobody depends on you. The room grew quiet. My mother needed help. My sister needed support. Every year there was another expense, another problem, another reason to wait. I laughed softly. Eventually waiting became normal. Vincent listened without interruption. Then he stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. The storm had completely passed now. The city shimmered beneath a clear sky. "Do you know something interesting about this hotel?" he asked. I glanced toward him. "What?" 20 years ago, this building almost did not exist. That surprised me. Everyone knew the Moretti Grand. It was one of the most recognizable luxury hotels in New York. Vincent folded his arms and looked out at the skyline. The investors thought the project was too risky. The location was wrong. The timing was wrong. The economy was uncertain. A faint smile appeared. Apparently, everything was wrong. I found myself smiling. "What happened?" He looked back at me. Someone decided uncertainty was not the same thing as impossibility. The answer lingered between us. I knew he was no longer talking about the hotel. My heartbeat quickened slightly. Vincent walked toward a nearby table and picked up a slim folder. He returned and placed it in front of me. "What is this?" I asked. "Open it." I hesitated before lifting the cover. Inside were documents about a hospitality leadership development program. The logo alone was enough to make my eyes widen. I knew the program. Everyone in the industry did. Graduates often moved into executive positions at major properties across the country. "Vincent." My voice barely worked. "This is impossible." He sat down across from me. "Why?" I looked at him in disbelief. "Because people like me do not get opportunities like this." The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Vincent's expression changed slightly. Not anger. Disappointment. "People like you," he repeated. Heat rushed into my face. I looked away. He remained silent for several seconds before speaking again. "Olivia, I have spent years meeting people who had every advantage imaginable." His voice was calm, steady. Very few of them possessed the resilience you carry every day. I swallowed hard. No one had ever described me that way before. Not resilient. Not capable. Mostly tired. Vincent leaned forward slightly. "I think you stopped seeing your own value a long time ago." The room fell silent. Outside, the city sparkled beneath the night sky. Inside, for the first time in years, a small and unfamiliar feeling began to emerge beneath the exhaustion. Hope. Hope can be dangerous when you have spent years living without it. That was the first thing I thought as I stared at the folder resting in my hands. The pages felt heavier now, not because of what they weighed, but because of what they represented. Possibility. A future. A version of my life I had stopped allowing myself to imagine. I looked down at the program information again. Leadership training. Mentorship opportunities. Career development. Everything I had once wanted. Everything I convinced myself belonged to someone else. I cannot accept this. The words escaped before I could stop them. Vincent remained completely calm. "Why?" I laughed softly and shook my head. "Because this is not real." He leaned back slightly. "It seems real enough to me." I looked away toward the city lights. People like me do not wake up one day and suddenly get opportunities like this. The moment I said it, I hated how defeated it sounded. Vincent noticed immediately. He always seemed to notice everything. "Olivia." His voice was steady. "You keep saying people like me." I looked at him. "Because it is true." "No." The answer came instantly. "It is familiar." "That does not make it true." The room fell silent. Outside, Manhattan sparkled beneath the night sky. Thousands of windows glowed across the skyline. Thousands of lives unfolding at the same moment. I wondered how many of those people were carrying fears nobody could see. Vincent stood and walked toward the windows. His reflection blended with the city beyond the glass. Powerful. Controlled. Yet there was something else now. Something quieter. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Someone exhausted?" A small laugh escaped him. "Yes. That too." I found myself smiling. It felt strange how easily he could do that. Then his expression became serious again. "I see someone who spent years putting other people first." His gaze met mine. Most people talk about sacrifice. Very few actually live it. I looked down at the folder. The emotions building inside me felt complicated. Gratitude. Fear. Hope. None of them were easy to separate. My phone suddenly vibrated inside my purse. The sound startled me. I pulled it out and immediately saw a message from my younger sister. I opened it without thinking. A photo appeared on the screen. She was standing outside a campus building, smiling beneath the afternoon sun. Underneath the photo was a short message. "Thank you for believing in me when I could not believe in myself." My throat tightened instantly. I stared at the words while emotion rushed through me. Every extra shift, every sleepless night, every sacrifice. Somehow they had mattered more than I realized. When I finally looked up, Vincent was watching quietly. He did not ask questions. He simply waited. "My sister," I said softly. "She is the reason I never quit." Vincent nodded. "Then maybe it is time someone reminds you not to quit on yourself." The room became very still. Outside, the city continued shining beneath the clear sky. Inside, for the first time in years, the future no longer felt like something disappearing in the distance. It felt like something waiting just beyond my reach. Vincent's words stayed with me long after the conversation should have ended. Someone reminds you not to quit on yourself. The sentence echoed quietly in my mind while I sat beside the enormous windows overlooking Manhattan. For years, every decision I made had been measured against responsibility. What needed to be paid? Who needed help? What sacrifice came next? Somewhere along the way, I stopped asking what I wanted. Maybe that was why sitting here felt so unfamiliar. Not because of the luxury around me. Because for the first time in a very long time, someone seemed interested in my future. Vincent moved toward a small bookshelf near the fireplace and selected a framed photograph resting among several awards and business recognitions. He studied it for a moment before setting it back down. The expression on his face changed slightly. Softer somehow. More distant. I noticed immediately. Who was in the picture? I asked carefully. For a second, I wondered if he would ignore the question. Instead, he looked toward the frame again. My father. The answer surprised me. Vincent rarely spoke about himself. In fact, almost everything I knew about him had come from newspapers, business articles, and public appearances. None of those sources ever revealed anything personal. He walked back toward the windows. He taught me something important when I was young. I waited quietly. He said the strongest people are usually the ones nobody notices. The room became still. The words felt strangely familiar. Vincent smiled faintly. At the time, I thought he was wrong. His gaze drifted toward the city lights. I thought strength looked powerful, loud, impressive. He paused. Then I watched ordinary people survive things most powerful people could never handle. I understood immediately. He was not talking about himself. He was talking about people like my mother, people like my sister, people carrying invisible burdens every day. Vincent turned toward me. You remind me of those people. Emotion tightened unexpectedly in my chest. Nobody had ever said something like that to me before. Most people noticed what I lacked. Time, money, opportunities. Vincent seemed to notice what remained despite all of that. You barely know me, I said softly. He nodded once. Perhaps. Then a small smile appeared. But I know enough. The answer made me laugh quietly. Somehow, the tension that had followed me for months felt lighter tonight. Not gone, just lighter. Vincent glanced toward the folder still resting on the table. The program director arrives tomorrow afternoon. My eyes widened. Tomorrow. He nodded. I arranged a meeting. Fear immediately returned. Not the fear of failure. The fear of possibility. What if I am not qualified? Vincent looked genuinely puzzled. Based on everything you have told me, that would be difficult to believe. I smiled despite myself. Outside, the city shimmered beneath the night sky. Inside, something was changing. Not all at once. Not dramatically, but enough to matter. For months, my future had felt like a closed door. Tonight, for the first time, I could almost imagine it opening. And as I looked across the room at the man who had chosen to stop and notice a stranger sitting alone in the rain, I began to realize that sometimes the people who change your life do not arrive with promises. Sometimes they arrive with a simple belief that you are capable of more than you can see yourself. The next afternoon arrived faster than I expected. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed the same questions. What if Vincent was wrong about me? What if I walked into that meeting and immediately proved I did not belong there? By noon, I found myself standing near the enormous windows of a private conference room high above Manhattan. Sunlight poured across the polished floor. The city stretched endlessly below. From this height, Everything looked possible. I wished I felt the same way. Vincent stood near the entrance reviewing a message on his phone. As always, he appeared completely calm. I envied that. You are thinking too much. His voice broke through my thoughts. I laughed softly. That obvious? A faint smile appeared. Only because you have been staring at the same building for 10 minutes. Before I could respond, the conference room door opened. A woman stepped inside carrying a leather portfolio. She looked confident without being intimidating, professional without appearing distant. Vincent immediately greeted her. Rebecca. She shook his hand warmly. Vincent. Then her attention shifted toward me. And you must be Olivia Bennett. I nodded. Nice to meet you. Rebecca Harper, the director of the leadership program. Someone whose approval could change the direction of my entire future. The realization made my heartbeat quicken again. We sat around a long table overlooking the skyline. For the first few minutes, Rebecca asked simple questions. My work history, my responsibilities, my experience in hospitality. Gradually, the conversation became easier. She listened carefully, not unlike Vincent. Every answer seemed to lead to another thoughtful question. Eventually, she closed her portfolio and leaned back slightly. Vincent told me very little about you. That surprised me. Rebecca smiled. He only said you were someone worth meeting. I glanced briefly toward Vincent. His expression remained unreadable. Rebecca continued. So tell me something that is not on your resume. The question caught me off guard. I looked down at my hands before answering honestly. I spent years believing survival was enough. The room became quiet. Recently, I started wondering if there might be room for more than that. Rebecca studied me for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. That may be the most honest answer I have heard all month. Relief washed through me. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. We discussed leadership, service, teamwork, and personal growth. Yet what surprised me most was how often the discussion returned to people. Helping people, understanding people, making them feel welcome, making them feel seen. By the time the meeting ended, my nervousness had faded into something else. Confidence. Not complete confidence. Just enough to stand a little taller. Rebecca gathered her things and rose from her chair. Before leaving, she looked directly at me. Olivia, some people build careers. Some people build trust. A smile touched her face. The second group is much harder to find. After she left, silence settled across the room. I stared out at the Manhattan skyline, glowing beneath the afternoon sun. Then I turned toward Vincent. Do you think it went well? For the first time all day, a genuine smile appeared on his face. Olivia, he said quietly, I think you finally started seeing what everyone else sees. The following morning felt different. Not because anything around me had changed, but because something inside me had. For the first time in years, I woke up without immediately thinking about problems. The worries were still there. The bills had not disappeared. My responsibilities remained exactly the same. Yet somewhere between the rain-soaked night outside the hotel and the conversation with Rebecca, a small part of me had begun to believe that my future might be larger than my struggles. Sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows as I stood overlooking Manhattan. The city moved with its usual rhythm. Yellow taxis crossed intersections. Office workers filled the sidewalks. Life continued in every direction. Vincent entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to me without saying a word. Somehow, he always seemed to know exactly when I needed one. You look different today, he said. I accepted the cup and smiled faintly. Is that a good thing? I think so. He looked toward the skyline. You are not waiting for something bad to happen. The observation caught me off guard because it was true. For years, I had lived that way. Every good moment felt temporary. Every victory felt fragile. Hope always came with a warning label. I looked down at the coffee in my hands. Maybe I am tired of being afraid. Vincent nodded slowly. Fear is useful. He glanced toward me. Until it becomes your entire life. The words stayed with me throughout the day. Later that afternoon, I met my mother for lunch near her apartment. She immediately noticed something had changed. Mothers always seem to notice things nobody else does. You are smiling more, she said before we had even finished ordering. I laughed. Apparently everyone is noticing that. Her eyes softened. Good. We spent hours talking. Really talking. Not about bills. Not about problems. About possibilities. About dreams. About the future. At one point, I told her about the leadership program. The meeting. The opportunity. Everything. Tears appeared in her eyes before I finished. Olivia, she said quietly, reaching across the table for my hand. Do you know what I have wanted most for you? I shook my head. Her smile was gentle. The chance to live your own life. The answer hit harder than I expected, because somewhere along the way, I had convinced myself that taking care of everyone else was enough. Hearing my mother say those words felt like receiving permission I never knew I needed. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the Manhattan skyline, my phone vibrated. My heart immediately accelerated. The sender's name appeared on the screen. Rebecca Harper. For several seconds, I simply stared at the notification. Fear and excitement collided inside me. Finally, I opened the message. The first sentence appeared on the screen. Thank you for meeting with me. I continued reading. Each word seemed slower than the last. Then I reached the paragraph that mattered. My breath caught. The leadership program would be honored to welcome me into the next class. For a moment, the city outside disappeared. The room disappeared. Everything disappeared except those words. After years of surviving, sacrificing, and putting my dreams aside, a door had finally opened. And standing beside the window, as evening lights began illuminating the city below, I realized the future was no longer something happening to me. For the first time in a very long time, it was something I could choose. 1 year later, I found myself standing beneath the grand chandelier of the Moretti Grand Hotel, watching guests cross the marble lobby with the same sense of wonder I once felt from the other side of the glass. Morning sunlight streamed through the towering windows, filling the space with gold. The hotel was alive with movement. Conversations echoed softly. Suitcases rolled across polished floors. Staff members greeted guests with warm smiles. It was everything I had once dreamed of being part of. And now, somehow, it was my reality. The leadership program had changed my life. Not overnight. Not magically. It took long days, difficult lessons, and more hard work than I thought possible. But every challenge brought me closer to the person I wanted to become. Today, I oversaw guest experience initiatives for multiple luxury properties. My mother was healthier. My sister had graduated from college. For the first time in years, our family was no longer surviving. We were living. My phone vibrated softly. A message appeared on the screen. Penthouse. 10 minutes. Vincent. A smile immediately found its way onto my face. Some things never changed. 10 minutes later, I stepped into the private elevator that carried me toward the highest floor of the hotel. The glass walls revealed Manhattan stretching endlessly beneath a brilliant blue sky. The same city that once felt overwhelming now felt full of possibility. When the elevator doors opened, Vincent was waiting near the windows overlooking the skyline. He turned as I entered. Time had changed many things over the past year, but not the calm confidence he carried. If anything, it seemed stronger now. You are late, he said. I checked my watch. By 20 seconds. A faint smile appeared. Exactly. I laughed and walked toward the windows. The view was breathtaking. The Hudson River sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. The city stretched toward the horizon. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We simply stood there watching the skyline. Eventually, Vincent broke the silence. Do you remember that night? I did not need to ask which one. Some memories never fade. The rain, the exhaustion, the feeling that nobody noticed I existed. I nodded slowly. Every detail. Vincent looked out across Manhattan. I almost left the office early that evening. The admission surprised me. Really? He nodded. Something made me stay. Silence settled between us. Then he smiled slightly. Best decision I made all year. Emotion tightened unexpectedly in my chest. I looked out at the city and remembered the woman I had been. Tired. Lost. Convinced that life would never change. If someone had shown her this moment, she never would have believed it. Vincent turned toward me. You know something? I raised an eyebrow. What? His expression softened. That night, I thought I was helping a stranger. The city shimmered beyond the glass. Sunlight danced across the skyline. And I asked quietly. A genuine smile appeared on his face. Rare. Honest. Real. I was wrong. I felt my own smile grow. Because I finally understood the truth too. The night I sat alone outside this hotel believing nobody cared, one man looked through the rain and chose not to look away. He gave a simple order that changed everything. Not because it saved my life, because it gave me back my future. And standing beside him 1 year later, surrounded by the city that once felt so cold, I realized something beautiful. Sometimes the people who rescue us are not the ones who solve our problems. Sometimes they are simply the ones who remind us that we are worth saving.